Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hero News. Kia ora Chewy, how are you, sir?
Kia ora Pat, finger guns, bang, bang, bang.
Or spirit fingers? Is that spirit? No, jazz fingers, jazz hands.
Jazz fingers. Yeah, I'm doing well for Monday, I guess.
Yeah. How's your weekend?
Weekend has been relatively chill. Obviously, you came out with me and my friends on Friday and had a delicious meal.
Yep, had a feed.
And that was excellent. Apart from that, not much. Stayed at home, dog sitting. It was good times.
Dog sitting, meeting friends' dogs at your place. So you had multiple, or dog sitting your own dog?
Yeah. We're very lucky in that the couple that own my dog's cousin often dog sit for us when we go out of town and that sort of thing. We haven't had much chance to reciprocate, so it's always nice that we can when we can.
Very good. I had a lot of running around with kids this weekend. So I had this idea to get a whole bunch of work done on Friday, and I was going to work in my studio, and I was going to work in the garage, and I did about 15% of it all. One of the highlights from the weekend, though, is, of course, my world famous Monday evening movie review. You seen Green Book?
Yes.
I loved it. What did you think of Green Book?
It won an Oscar,
and
I do not think it deserved it.
What did it win an Oscar for?
I think best screenplay, I believe.
Oh yeah.
But the year that it came out, I don't know if it was a deserving winner. There are parts of that story I like. It is a little bit too white savory for me.
It won the Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor. That's not just that, and Oscar won 3. I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah. What year was that? I'll just find out who it was
2018 maybe. Against. Was it 2018? No. Yeah, 2018 maybe. Yep, 2018. 2018.
See who it was up against.
Raisin says Into the Spider-Verse should have won Best Picture that year.
Bro, yes, absolutely. That is still one of my favorite movies. Like, no shit.
I liked it. I mean, it was one of those movies that it was long, but it felt like it wasn't dragging. It moved along at an okay speed.
I'm looking at the nominees for that year. It seems a pretty lackluster lineup. Yep. So nominated Green Book, Black Panther, Black Klansman, which is excellent, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favourite, Roma, A Star Is Born, and Vice.
Yeah, there's not a lot of, like, you think the world class standouts
nothing
for
that
the next
really
15
jumps
years,
out at me and says, oh fuck, that's absolutely, like, this is one of the things me and a colleague of mine like doing is going back and looking at Best Picture nominees, and finding the years where they absolutely flubbed it. Like they gave an award to a picture that no one remembers, and one of the ones that was nominated and got nothing was fucking excellent and has real legs and just people come back to. So yeah. I don't know. Green Book left me a little bit cold.
Really? I liked it. I think this is the end of our broadcast, isn't it? If we can't agree, aren't we supposed to agree all the time?
You're allowed to like movies, and Pat, you're even allowed to be wrong about things.
Yeah. Are you allowed to be wrong? Anyway, watched it on Saturday night. One of the reasons watched it on Saturday night was finally got some speakers kind of set up around the house, so I wanted to test them out and stuff as well for a bit of fun. But yeah, it was great fun actually. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed and I enjoyed that it's kind of based on a true story. When I find based on a true story, I always kind of go, well, what does that mean? How far off the truth is it really? But I had a bit of a look, and I mean, most of the read up the write-ups that I read none of them particularly said it massively strayed from the original story, from the absolute truth. So it's fascinating, interesting to see them, of course, at the end always as they were, and they died. Both of the main characters in real life died in 2013 within 3 months of one another, lifelong friends. It's kind of a nice story.
I mean, I that was Viggo Mortensen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a phenomenal actor, and I really, really enjoy him. You know, best supporting actor nod would be great for that film. You know, maybe that's a sign of the weakness of the other offerings that year.
Maybe. But yeah, onwards we go. Weekend always involves a bit of Q&A, and Q&A this weekend had Karen Shaw on it. Normally we would delve quite heavily into that, but to be honest with you, I mean, there'd be a lot of silly things we could point at and go, meh, if we wanted to. But the big thing from the Karen Shaw conversation was the announcement made later in the day on Sunday about youth crime. And so what we've decided to do today is I've already recorded, if you're a patron, you'll have already seen it if you wanted to, a conversation with Tamatha Paul from the Greens, who we will play out within this hour. And it was really a response that the opposition had to that. That's what we're going to have a look at tonight. And before you ask, and before our lovely friends who may disagree with us ask, I kind of spoke to her before the news about Goldrig came out, and also the news about, sorry, her name eludes me right now, but being sent, the woman who's on, the Green MP who's on, accused of doing stuff with migrants. So I kind of recorded it. Tana, yeah, before those two were made obvious, which was later in the afternoon. So there's nothing about those in there, and it wasn't through any point of avoiding the topic. It was just that they weren't forefront of mind at the time, so they're not a part of the conversation. And then another thing that's going to be a bit fun, which you guys might see tomorrow night, later on tonight, as in once we've finished the show, I'm doing a pre-record with O'Shan Llewellyn, who is the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner. So the Welsh Language Committee in Wales, he's the deputy to it, and that's why I'm doing the conversation at 11 o'clock tonight, because it's like 10 in the morning over there. And I just wanted to get, because we've talked about this a lot, I wanted to get a bit of a vibe of what other countries who aren't maybe quite as colonised as places like New Zealand and Australia and the USA, how they handle their minority Indigenous languages. So I'm quite interested to see if Wales, Scotland, Ireland, these places, obviously who have been colonised, but not as colonised, I guess you'd say, not as obvious a difference between the Indigenous native people and the colonisers, if they have the same kind of disrespect by half of the political makeup as seems to happen in some of these other countries. I'm just fascinated by that. So I'm doing that tonight at about 11 o'clock, and it will probably play tomorrow at about, I don't know, probably play tomorrow is what we're going to say. And other than that, I have an announcement to make, which is all of the merch ordered 2 weeks ago was sent out today. All of the merch ordered last week, we are actually waiting on one person who needs to come back to me with the sizing situation. We have to get all of the orders in at once because they won't just send away for one t-shirt. So James, who won last week, if you're listening, check your emails and come back to me ASAP on what size top you need. And if I don't hear from you, James, by like 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll send it off anyway. I'll just try and figure out later on. So yeah, they'll be in later in the week, and we'll do them over the weekend to get them out to you next week as well. I don't have a total yet for how much we're giving to the Cancer Society because I'm just waiting for all of the, because, you know, the website takes a cut and this and that. And so I'll wait till it comes in and we'll be able to work it out properly. And I think that's about it. Other than, speaking of patronage, want to say welcome on board to Layla and to Claire and to Jordan and to Vcash and to Brad and to Monica, who have signed up in the last week or so. And also I've just had a notification in the last half hour. Taha has joined on as well. Taha, you won't be in the credits because you only signed up today. But everyone else that I mentioned, thank you for coming on board. You'll all be in the credits at the end of the show. And if you like what we do and you'd like to support what we do, one of the ways you can do it is to become a patron. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. As you see there is the interview with Tamatha, and that's been up there since a little bit after we recorded it. It's 20 minutes long. You can see there are people interacting with it who have already had a chance to see it as well. This is the review. The review. Wow, great interview, Pat. I really thought Tamatha was a great speaker, but this completely confirmed it. She's so right when she said the difference in what the left want compared to what the right want. Really enjoyed this. Thanks, Pat. Oh, that's a bit of a teaser, isn't it? Teaser. And then also, of course, this weekend there'll be a Zoom call with anyone that wants to join in on it, because that's what we do once a month. And if you are in the top kind of executive producer role, I'll be in contact with you guys this month as well, because they get a monthly touch base one-on-one if they indeed want that. Okay, I think that's about it, Joey. Anything else from you before we get into it?
I have no housekeeping or new business to bring to the committee.
Nothing at all. You're not even going to talk about the All Blacks or anything? Nothing? Like literally nothing?
Was there sports ball? I don't know. Apparently the Warriors got thrashed, and so people can stop saying up the Wars now.
Thank gosh.
That's probably a good thing. Okay, one frivolous story before we crack on, because I know you want to get out of here in a timely fashion and not 2 hours from now. Dunedin is currently losing its shit because a Kmart is opening.
Yeah,
and
Thursday.
It makes me want to die.
Yeah.
It is so cringy that there is now a traffic advisory out for the end of the week that you might not be able to get around South Dunedin because Kmart is opening. It's so depressing. Like, I saw a story in the ODT. I haven't got it because I'm not dignifying it. But it was a story just basically pitching it. Isn't it great that Kmart is opening because families are struggling? And I was just like, a reporter wrote this, and it just reads like a Kmart propaganda piece. It's amazing. And like, I want to pretend that Dunedin is a big grown-up city, but it's the way that it's frothing over a fucking Kmart opening is just embarrassing.
Yeah, I'm in two minds because one of my children has a part-time job there. But I remember after COVID, right next to Kmart is where the South Dunedin McDonald's is. I took a video of it actually, and like the couple of days after COVID, we were allowed to go back to places. 200 cars in the queue to go to McDonald's after COVID. Like, people were that hanging out for McDonald's. 200 cars in the queue. Unreal. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it's all kind of terribly put together, cheap, shitty crap. I wouldn't shop there unless it was an absolute. The kids love it, Chewy. The teens seem to love it. They go in there and they get their phone covers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's not such a big deal.
I'm just a curmudgeon that's just going to sit on the hill and look it down and then go, "Oh, you fucking idiot." But look, let's put this into perspective for people that are outside of Dunedin. When Kmart closed here a few years ago, people used to bus to Invercargill to go to Kmart.
Yeah.
They would charter a bus and travel for hours just to go to Kmart.
Yeah. Sad, eh?
It's fucking weird. I don't get it.
Do you know the one thing that's sadder?
What's that?
The one thing that's sadder is Friday when we left, we got an announcement that a ferry had broken down and that the government was advised that week to replace the Cook Strait ferries with new, smaller boats. To which I on Twitter responded by going, bah, ha, 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 ha. Is it too early for a we told you so? To which someone, obviously the memes went crazy over the weekend, and this was kind of my favorite one. For those of you in the audio podcast, it's a picture of the bottom of the North Island and the top of the South Island and a ferry going into the water like Titanic. And Nicola Willis saying, thank goodness we saved that $3 billion on the new ferries because we're going to need that $4 billion to fix this fecking big pothole, which is quite funny. I quite like that one. It's kind of hilarious, actually. And yes, there are some differences between what they've been advised and what was going to be purchased. And yes, what was going to be purchased wouldn't have been here till 2026. But we told you so. We said there will be an incident, and I was playing uber pessimist, actually. I think I said, who knows what it'll be? It'll be a breakdown, or at worst case, it could be a death. something goes wrong, and you will have to lump it. And today, the more I hear interviews today about the Interana, things like, aren't we so lucky it broke down or ran aground in an actual harbour in the Sound? We have no tugboats that can do anything in the actual strait. Both the tugboats in Wellington and the tugs that are in Picton area, they're only in harbour tugs. So this ferry, although when people have been saying that, aren't we lucky it didn't happen in the middle of the strait? I'm like, well, how are you going to run aground in the middle of the strait? Let's just be fair. But let's just point to the failing infrastructure that is the ferries. How to have if they have a problem in the middle of the strait, there's actually nothing there that can help them. Chewy, this is the problem. And I don't quite know all the numbers that are being bandied about now and all the kind of political, yeah, we can do this, we'll get some new ones, and how much they're going to spend. We'll get into that over the next few minutes. Let's just start with TVNZ tonight and their coverage of the actual situation. And then there's a tag on at the end of about 90 seconds with them talking about how National is responding to this. And what National is doing is kind of going, yeah, it's all good. Yeah, we're on top of this. It's no problems at all. And you kind of go, really? Are you? Let's have a look.
The grounding of the Aratere has once again ignited calls for an ocean-capable tugboat in Cook Strait. The Picton Harbour tugs played a key role refloating the ferry. Many say it's lucky an incident didn't happen in the open ocean. Here's Jessica Roden, who covered the story throughout the weekend.
A Monday morning clean-up after a long weekend.
It takes a lot of manpower, and as people are tired from the weekend's activity, we're just going to slowly bring the gear in.
Packing away equipment that was fortunately not needed.
A lot of our oil spill equipment is stored in here, so at the back you can see some of the land sea booms that were deployed.
Teams in Picton today debriefing after working around the clock from the moment the Aratere ran aground.
I have had some sleep.
We've got to ask the question as well. I'm sure it'll come out in the investigation. Just going back, oh gosh, that went a long way. Oh gosh, what have I done? How the heck did it run aground like that? I mean, they're talking about it running aground. There we go. There's the image I was looking for. Running aground. I mean, that looks like it's not just run aground, but lost complete control and drifted into, like, that's not the route that he's driving, he or she, whoever the captain is there, to be pushed into the wall like that. I'm assuming they either lost power and drifted in, or something happened. So this could have happened. Tell.
So a couple of weeks ago, they were upgrading their steering gear, and it looks like the steering has failed at this point. So actually, the running aground means nothing. Actually, it's the failed steering, and that could have happened in the middle of the strait. So this is what we're dealing with: a not fit for purpose infrastructure that is going to continue to break down and be a hazard to the people using it. But well, this is the second incident in the last, what is it? Is it 6-8 months? We had a different ferry lose power in the strait completely, and the Aratere had a problem with the propeller. I think less than 12 months ago. So, you know, we are rolling the dice each time.
And just remember, as long as we get a nice second-hand Corolla, that's all we need to get. Which don't exist.
I have had some sleep. We got the regional harbour master from Canterbury to come up. So we've had a team of 41 people from multiple agencies coming in.
The vessel now safely docked, but it could have been much worse. It could have happened further into the journey.
Had this happened out in Cook Strait, in open waters, these wouldn't have been the tugs that we needed. We would have needed an open sea rescue tug.
There are 2 tugs in Picton, and they played a big role this weekend.
It's like any other port in New Zealand, our expertise is in berthing and unberthing ships, so our tugs are harbour tugs.
So are Wellingtons, and they're not designed for the open ocean.
They have capability to respond in an emergency.
It is fascinating. I guess the reality is it would be good to have tugs that can work out in the ocean as well, but it is interesting that they're going to, we need a tug to go into the ocean when it breaks down, rather than let's get something new that's not likely to break down. So, I mean, I get it, because new things can break down. People who have bought new cars, in fact, we were talking on Friday night about people who bought new cars and within, 100 kilometres of buying them, they're broken. It can happen. But also getting a more reliable new Corolla, Nicola, might also be a solution, rather than trying to find a way to mitigate an ailing, broken infrastructure as well.
but they've got limited capability.
Last year, the Kaitaki lost power in the Cook Strait with 800 people on board and was just minutes from a major disaster. A few months later, a container ship got into trouble off fuel spit, an ocean-capable tug from Taranaki, eventually towing it back to Wellington. Last month, the government put aside $600,000 for
I
a
can't go back because
feasibility
it'll,
study for an open
it's a
ocean
live show,
tug
but
in the Cook Strait.
significant, eh?
One News understands the key issues are who would pay for it and how it would be staffed.
Isn't that the key problem for this national government? Remember, this is the role of the right. When they're in opposition, they say government doesn't work. Government's not responsible enough to provide services to the public. Then they get into government and they pass legislations or they cancel purchases that cause that goods or service to fail. Then they sit back and they go, yep, see, we always told you it wasn't going to work. Privatization is the answer. Who will pay for it? How will it be staffed? It's an interesting question, Chewy. Yeah. Very interesting question.
While it's hoped it would be really needed, a crew would need to be available at a moment's notice to respond to an unfolding event.
The place and the location of this incident, we're very fortunate that it was close, so we could put tugs on scene really quickly.
A lucky break, keeping the ferry service afloat for now. Jessica Roden, One News.
And they go straight into the Prime Minister's comments as well, so we'll stick with it.
Operating within 5 years. Christopher Luxon says reports suggest the current inter-islander ferries will reach the end of their useful life before the end of the decade. He says they'll need to be replaced by then at the latest.
Different analysis and reports I've seen suggest 2029, but having said that, you know, we'd like to push as fast as we can to get a good, viable...
How's 2026, Christopher? We could have had some by 2026. Would that be as fast as we can?
Solution in place.
And Luxon says the weekend's incident hasn't made him regret cancelling a deal which would have delivered 2 new ferries in 2026. He says a cost blowout meant the deal didn't stack up.
So there's the basic story. Go, Chewy. Go.
This is the thing that's fucking me off. Every time the media talks about the IREX ferries, they talk about this massive cost blowout.
Yeah.
They are telling half the story. The ferries prices were locked in. They were negotiated. They were 40% cheaper than they would be now. The cost blowout was on building the port facilities, more resilient port facilities, more resilient against earthquakes. Picton and Wellington, the thing that joins them together, apart from the ferry route, is the fault line they fucking sit on.
Yeah.
This isn't reckless, frivolous spending. This is critical national infrastructure that handles billions of dollars of freight every year. And we end up in this small-minded place where the country never grows. We can never do things ourselves, and we mustn't ever have anything new. This second-hand Corolla fucking chat of like, let's treat this country like a poor family.
Yeah.
Deciding that they might need to upgrade a car is just foolish. I want a government that sees the country that we could be and do the things that we are capable of. And this is so predictable. I woke up to stories today, again, maybe the solution is to privatize because Kiwi Rail clearly can't handle their shit. Maybe trying to service a 25-year-old ferry nearing the end of its life is more difficult and more expensive the older it gets. It's our only rail-enabled ferry. It's laughable that we're going down this. These guys are being economic vandals and they should be lashed by this. News came out today that it wasn't the case that no work had been done on the ferries. Hyundai were putting together engine components and spray painting steel plates for the hull. Now, we can't go cap in hand back to Hyundai and go, actually, we made a mistake. We paid hundreds of millions of dollars to cancel that contract and we get nothing because it's too expensive. But we've spent $1 million so far in consultation fees to work out whether we can do a 4-kilometre long 4-lane tunnel under Wellington, which everybody agrees is a laughable pie in the sky boondoggle. So the party of money and the party of making sure taxpayer dollars are used most effectively have spunked all this money up the wall for tax cuts for landlords. And they're talking about how important roads are, even though that plan ballooned out by billions of dollars. But suddenly designing a ferry for our conditions that'll last decades and handle our increased population and handle rail freight without having to bring the train in, take the stuff off the train, put the stuff on the ferry, take it to Wellington, take it out of the train, truck it to where the train is. You know, it's why are these guys still there? It's clown shoes behavior.
So let's just pick up on what you've just said there, because whilst people are kind of going, well, it's going to be the same because they're just going to be smaller ferries. This is from the weekend, like this is Saturday or Sunday. The government's independent advisory group has recommended brand new Cook Strait ferries similar in size to the current fleet, One News understands. Last week, ministers received a report from the group in which it's understood options were laid out for the specifications of the new ferries and when they could arrive. The group has recommended that the ferries be smaller than the proposed IREX ferries and not rail enabled, although rail would still be able to be shunted on the vessels as often happens now. It's understood, funnily enough, Chewy, you reliable second-hand Corolla, well, it's understood second-hand ships were not an option on the table. But ministers were said to be considering whether Kiwi Rail would buy the ferries, here's the warning people, or a different entity would handle the purchase. Now, Chewy, what you just said as well, right, about it was all costed out. So this is what's going to happen, Whānau. I almost guarantee it. I bet Chewy's life on it. Is that imagine you were in a contract through COVID to get a 3-bedroom house built, right? Signed, sealed, delivered, was done. You were done. It was going to cost you $1 million. And of course, jib went through the roof, prices went through the roof through COVID. Doesn't matter. You've got a contract at the end of COVID when they finished it. Let's say it's getting finished for Christmas. It's going to cost you $1 million. If you try and build the same house today, it's going to cost you $1.5 million. So actually, you can either spend more to build the same house today, or you can get a lesser product, let's say a 2-bedroom house, or on a smaller set or a smaller footprint for the same money. That's what's going to happen with the ferries. The ferries are either going to be smaller and not service us as well because they won't be rail enabled for the same money, or they're going to cost more. That's what's going to happen. We said that's what was going to happen, and it's what's going to happen. The other thing, Chewy, that I wanted to mention, which I don't quite understand, right? This is from the press over the weekend as well. Now, I just highlighted the word billion because it's a fun word to highlight. Part of this article called New Zealand to the back of the queue for new Cook Strait ferries. From having them built for us to the back of the queue. The government in December cancelled an order for 2 new ferries, which would have been getting built now due to a $2 billion budget blowout, right? That's what they said. Now, further on in this article, and I don't understand this, it says this. Over the weekend, Transport Minister Simeon Brown announced that the government has ensured funding is available to purchase new ships. Oh, that's good. I wonder how much they've got. While Willis said that there was a $7.5 billion multi-year capital allowance that the new ferry funding would come from. So if there's a $7.5 billion multi-year capital allowance, what are you going to do now? Spend $1.8 billion on a lesser product because you wouldn't spend $2 billion on the Ferrari. So here we go. This is what's going to now happen, Nicola, you second-hand Ferrari. You're going to fucking buy a second-hand Ferrari. Well, let's be honest. You're going to buy a new Corolla, not a second-hand Corolla, a new Corolla, right? But you're going to pay as much for it as someone who would have bought a Ferrari. That's what's going to happen. You're going to pay Ferrari prices for a Corolla product. That's what's happening. Dumb shits.
This whole thing reeks of just going after a project because Labor has done it. Like, by all accounts, Labor did absolutely everything correctly with tendering out these ferries. They investigated what they needed. They looked at outside issues like lowering our carbon emissions. You know, a big thing about these ferries is that they were diesel electric. They had a whole bunch of batteries that could be charged and while they're at port and charged by diesel generators, and you could expand the battery packs at a later date to make it even more electric. You know, they did all of these things that all had benefits to our carbon obligations as well. They negotiated a great deal from Hyundai, one of the top shipyards in the world. And it was long-term thinking. And this just seems to be a thing that we will get a left government in, we get long-term multi-generational thinking, and then we get national in, and it's cut. Any project that Labor had their fingerprints on, whether it was good or bad or middling, cut.
Yeah.
These guys wanted to tell a story about a poorly managed project by Labor with a massive cost blowout. And at no point have they acknowledged that there were two parts to this. And the other part of it is it's infrastructure, critical infrastructure in quake-prone places. It would have lasted us generations.
Yeah.
And we've chucked the baby out of with the bathwater. And as you said, we're going to be paying close to the same amount for less capable things. And if you're a ship maker, and the New Zealand government comes to you and says, hey, look, we need to buy some ships. And you can go, well, I heard what you did to Hyundai, so who knows whether this is going to go through. So we're not going to give you a good deal because we don't trust you. Like, I would love to be in the delegation that turned up at Hyundai and go, actually, mate, we've changed our minds. We'd like to get those ships. Thanks. And Hyundai goes, get fucked. We're busy. Economic vandals, absolute clown shoes.
Okay, so I've just written it down to get this right. This is the National Party, branding for 2026. Spend the same money today for a Corolla that would have purchased a brand new Ferrari 6 months ago. Vote National 2026.
And I've just realised that I haven't mentioned at all that this plays into the Tory playbook of take a state-owned institution, run it into the wall, point at them and go ineffective, corrupt, incompetent. The only solution, because we've only got 3 years before the bottoms of these ships start falling out, the only option that we've got is private enterprise.
Yep.
And then you're going to be looking at an overseas company that somebody's a shareholder and swoop in and save the day, look really good for a couple of years, and then start really extracting profit. Yeah. And if we're talking about freight between countries, one day there'll be countries, between islands, then you're looking at it affecting prices. And then we'll have to look back and go, what fucking shower of idiots caused this easily foreseeable situation? And it's going to be old man Chewy and old man Pat sitting on our porches pointing at you, go, we fucking told you so.
Fucking told you, sons. Look, I tell you what, perfect segue into the next topic as well, because they say, if they try and say there's no money for ferries, they just found $600 million today for Pharmac from future budgets. So that's how they've found the money for this, from future budgets. So if they say we can't afford it, but all of a sudden you can find, I mean, look, this is a great story about drugs being funded, medications being funded. But I don't want to skip past this idea of how the government was forced to reach into next year's budget to get money for something they're doing today. Let's have a look at the story. And this is a good news story. But the way this government, like they talk about Trump, yeah? They talk about, wasn't Trump's years amazing when it came to illegal immigration? The border was never safer, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, that's because the world closed down thanks to COVID and people weren't leaving to come across the border. Now, that means he actually fell into a quote unquote good statistic, but he did it without any effort, almost, without him being there. Those things would have happened. Excuse me for a second, I've got to call the dog. Sorry, just getting the dog back. She's going for a wander. Get on your mat. So it was actually had nothing to do with Trump, the numbers. My sense for this is almost got nothing to do with national for this good news story, other than they stumbled and bumbled their way into it because they said something stupid before the election that they've pushed hard to fulfill. I'll give you more at the end. Have a listen.
Tēnā tātou katoa, good evening. Kiwis.
Good story overall.
Life-saving drugs are celebrating tonight after the government announced a monster funding boost for medicine buying agency Pharmac. It'll get an extra $604 million
Amazing.
over the next 4 years.
150 more million a year.
54 new drugs and help 175,000 patients in the next 12 months. Now, National had specified 13 new cancer drugs that it wanted funded. Under this package, only 7 of those will be funded, but the remainder will be replaced by alternative drugs that are either as good or better.
So even that's good. Like, we criticised them last week because fucking Reti was going on about we're going to have exactly the same drugs as we listed. We're going to have exactly the same drugs. The ones we said we're going to have. And the medical institution were going, there's better drugs than those now. So even that's good. So they've done the right thing by fulfilling the drugs which are the best for people out of that list and getting better ones. It's a good story. It's good for patients. It's good for some cancer sufferers. It's good. This is a good day for New Zealand, for the New Zealand health system.
There will also be an extra 13 cancer drugs funded, along with a further 28 drugs for other conditions. It's a response to an outcry from patients after the promised drugs weren't funded in the budget. Political editor Jenna Lynch has the details.
Patients like Vicky Hudson-Craig were hanging off every word of the Prime Minister today.
So today we are very proud to be making a health announcement.
As the government announced it would pour $600 million into Pharmac to fulfil its cancer drug promise.
We are delivering on our promise to support Kiwis fighting cancer.
Vicky has stage 4 melanoma. The treatment she's on is unfunded and one of the 13 promised by National on the election campaign. She's currently paying more than $5,000 a month for it herself. Her drug wasn't among those named today.
Really pleased for Pharmac and for New Zealand in general, but on a personal level, a little confused and uncertain still.
We could have done things and communicated things a little bit better, but I just say to you, this is a substantive, significant, over-the-top investment that we're making here that I think will absolutely transform many Kiwis' lives.
It's, it's life or death that I need to be on that drug, and they appealed to people like me, friends and family of mine, people that we know that voted purely because of this policy.
The promise was...
Can I just say, this is not in defence of the national government. I don't quite understand that part of the story, because the 13 drugs that they said they were going to get have been funded or alternatives for it. Yet the person in the story just there was saying she was voting for this government for those drugs, but it seems that the drug that she needs wasn't in that list either. I guess what she's saying is because there was a focus on cancer, but just to be accurate, what I hear, Chewy, tell me if you hear it differently, but what I hear her saying, her drug's not on there, at the same time as the government saying all of those drugs, or better ones, have been funded, which means her drug was probably never on there anyway. She was probably just hopeful that other ones would be. Is that a fair, like, at least observation right now?
That's my read on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Just to make it clear, and this is not to, this is not to support what's going on right now, but just to be as accurate as we can.
Was a glaring omission from this year's budget, and ministers have been scrambling behind the scenes to come up with a fix to the quite complex policy problem. Because Pharmac's independent from politicians, the government cannot specify which treatments it should fund. Pharmac has a wait list of drugs it wants to fund. It's ranked, but the rankings are secret for commercial reasons. So to fund the specific drugs the government wants to, it needed to give Pharmac enough money to fund all the drugs ranked ahead of the 13 promised.
Right. Did you get that? We can't skip over that. So imagine that there's 30 drugs and the drugs they're named are number 4, 7, 9, 15, 18. That means to make sure their election promise was fulfilled, Chewy, they had to fund enough to get right the way down to 18. So all these other drugs have just been caught up in their blunder about announcing what they were going to do before the election to get these cancer drugs funded. So that's why I'm saying they've blundered into this. This is not good governance. This is great for New Zealand. It is not good governance. It is not good politics. They've gone, well, hang on, for me to get down to number 22, because that's the last one we said, it's currently number 22, we have to fund all of those to make sure it happens, because they're not allowed to say only fund 1, 7, 9, 15, 22. They can't do that. So the only way they can get to number 22, arbitrary figure, is to fund all of them. So they've fucking fallen into this, Chewy, by giving New Zealand a really good outcome, or really good result when it comes to the health system, because they were such terrible electioneers and made such a balls up about this before the election. Yours.
Yeah. As I said, this is a great result for people that need those drugs. It's a great result for Pharmac to have extra funding. It's absolutely not because of good governing.
No.
It's not because of good process. It's not because of good decision making. It is because they fucked up bad and they got absolutely lashed by the public and the media and they panicked.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it would have been great. Like, what would we be saying if these guys came in and said, hey, look, we've identified this clear lack of what Pharmac needs to bring in. This is what we've campaigned on. We have the funds in the budget because we're sensible. No, they flubbed it at every fucking step of the way. And now they're just panicked and they're like, oh, we're trying to spin this into a good thing. It is a good thing, but not because of you.
Yeah, no, and like Mike says there on the message, it's 56 drugs. I'm picking out. So that probably means one of those 13 drugs they named was probably number 56. So that's from, so to make sure all of those drugs or their equivalent got funded, they had to go all the way to number 56, which is great. Like, honestly, it's a really good news story. And I'm not trying to be a partisan hack here, but it's with no thanks to National. It's really not, because they were forced to. And there's lots of other people here saying in the chat at the moment, let's put a few of them up, saying about this. Shows how desperate they are just because of the polls. Steph says too little too late. I'll say this, right? I was thinking about this today. Funnily enough, Chewy, I was thinking about this based on that conversation we had last week about if there's a conspiracy theorist in your family. Like, when a conspiracy theorist comes to the light, even if they've been a prick for the last 10 years, there's a celebration that they've come to the light. Like, honestly, I think being gracious and going, awesome, you've seen the light, let's walk forward now. This feels a bit like that. These guys have provided, guys and girls, this government has provided something that they didn't want to do before the election. They probably still don't want to do now, because they know the mountain of criticism that's going to come to how they're handling it. But all of that aside, we've got these drugs now through Pharmac. I mean, that's all that really matters. So I understand what you're saying, Steph, too little too late. I don't know if I entirely agree, because all I can think of in the U-turn of the century, says Rod Tang, is that those medications are now part of the Pharmac system. Fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying? But I think people are right. It is smacks of desperation.
It's funny how much money can just be fucking magicked up when they really step on themselves.
Yeah. Well, should we get to that?
Yes, we should.
Let's get to that.
Secret for commercial reasons, so to fund the specific drugs the government wants to, it needed to give Pharmac enough money to fund all the drugs ranked ahead of the 13 promised.
Finally, we start to bridge the gap between New Zealand and the countries we like.
Oh, this is the thing I hate. These fuckers, man. They're selling it off like, yes, we've finally done the right thing. We're up there. It's like, you have to. You've had to. You've been caught with your hand in the cookie jar, as my mum used to say, and you've had to, or else you wouldn't be able to live this thing down. I tell you what, I'd love to see what their internal polling is around cancer drugs up until this point. I guarantee you that would have driven a bunch of this money being found.
Compare ourselves with in terms of medicine funding. This uplift is enormous.
Blood cancers like leukemia were excluded from National's initial promise, and treatment for those will now be covered by the additional 13. The other 28 drugs cover conditions like infections, osteoporosis, sexual health, mental health, dermatology, and respiratory and inflammatory conditions. Malcolm Mulholland has been campaigning for better access to drugs for 5 years.
There are a lot of faces of patients, both those who are no longer with us and those who are waiting for those drugs to be funded, that I can visualise right now. It's a very emotional time. This is great news.
Great news for a lot of patients, but there's inevitably those who will miss out. Maggie Ngatai has advanced breast cancer.
There is no mention of the drug that I need. They did just mention breast cancer. The energy that it takes to deal with the financing side takes away from the healing side.
7 of the 13 medicines National promised are on Pharmac's waitlist, so could be funded quickly, with the first available from October or November. However, the others need more clinical advice, or Pharmac hasn't received applications for them. That's where Vicky's drug sits. For those ones, the government has pledged to fund an equal or better alternative.
I can't give a commitment as to when those 6 might be able to come forward, but we do know that we'll start deploying the whole package October, November.
Anyone that's living with cancer knows that time is critical, and that you don't know how long you've got, and you don't know how long the drugs will work. So yesterday was too long, really.
But the wait continues.
So there you go. That's the story, Chu. And as I said, overall, it's a really good story. It's not, and look, the next election, right, National will run on this. They will run on what they've done with Pharmac. And you know, what is that saying? Let baby have their ball, whatever it is. Because of them, we've got these. But as I said, it's almost like they've fallen into it with no knowledge of what they're doing. Just quickly though, on the funding for it, Clint Smith, old friend of the show, Clint Smith, was on Twitter tonight, and he says this: "It was weird to hear Luxon say, quote, isn't it amazing we found the money to deliver this extra funding," end quote. No, you just took money from next year's unallocated budget allowance. There's no magic there. It just means less money available for other health, education, etc. next year. New Zealand Taxpayers Union, the government announced an additional funding for Pharmac is welcome, but it's a welcome one, but the government must set out where that money is coming from. We can't afford to load up more and more debt, so future taxpayers end up spending more on paying interest costs and less on life-saving medicines. So you've lost the Taxpayers Union as well, and Clint points out where the money's coming from, next year's budget. Again, headline, fantastic that there's 56 new drugs being funded. Subheader, no thanks to National. Kind of almost exactly that.
Yeah, it's really comforting to know that our current government's approach to health funding is basically a pyramid scheme that they are in with themselves. How long do you think it will take for people to realize that these guys are incompetent? Is it like, I mean, I know we started joking about one-term government, but I see more and more chat about that every day.
Yeah, I mean, I still go by the stats and say how unlikely that is, but
it's super unlikely. But
yeah,
it needs to happen. It's just this shower of shit. If these guys, if our media keeps on fumbling this, and they lose that thread of showing how consistently shithouse these guys are.
Yep.
They need to keep on tugging that until the whole thing unravels. What I am worried about them is them front loading all of this incompetence, all of these lies, all of this nasty stuff, so they can go into an election run with just a series of sugar hits and good news.
Well,
you know, crashing the economy in the hope that we get a bounce in 2 years' time to make everybody feel good about National again is just so gloriously cynical.
Yeah. Hey, look, a couple of things. I mean, as you're talking about one-term government, you know, as Simon says very succinctly, I'm guessing Pharmac will have a fiscal cliff in 2028. Yeah, it's exactly what they're calling fiscal cliffs. But completely just, you know, beside the point, and I only saw this on Calvin's feed today, people who voted for Winston aren't all that happy.
Winston Peters, what an absolute disappointment he has been.
What a damn squib he was, wasn't he?
For the freedom
we had such high hopes for him, but
he promised everything, and I will listen, and I will talk to the freedom movement. He came to the Freedom Village, and all he was doing was using every single one of us to get back into power and then do nothing. And he's basically
you're amazed. It's, I mean, like, but what I'm saying is one-term government. There you go. There's a voting bloc that's not going back to New Zealand first. So who knows? Who knows?
I love Liz Gunn talking about fucking voting for Winston Peters. Didn't you have your own political party that was going to get like 1 million votes or something like that?
I don't know if she was voting for Winston Peters, but you know, this idea, yeah. Hey, I think we're going to keep trucking unless there's anything desperate you want, because there's a bunch of super chats we should get to, and then we've got an interview with Tamatha Paul coming up as well.
I'm just before we completely leave the ferry on the shore there, someone's just flicked through a Herald article in its archive, so it looks like garbage. But members of the Ministerial Advisory Group looking at the future of KiwiRail's Cook Strait ferry service have been paid more than $80,000 over the last 2 months.
Yeah,
investigating what we do from here on in. There is talk of the sunk cost of getting out of this contract with Hyundai being $800 million. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade warned that cancelling the contract would damage our relationship with Korea.
Look, I laughed there, and when I put out that tweet on Friday, which was like, "Bah!" A bunch of people were like, "Oh, look at how much the left celebrates whilst New Zealand burns," and I was just like, "Yeah, who set the fucking fire to the place? Who's put the kindling on there? Who's lighting it and making it burn?" I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's like, it's shock, it's disbelief. It's like, we've said this for the last month. We told you, we warned you. We stood on top of the thing with our flags, and we did semaphore, and we said, warning, warning, you know, crash coming. And all what we said and more is happening. So I laugh because it's probably disgust. It's like, well, what else can you do? If you don't laugh, you're going to cry, Joey.
Like we've had transitions between a left and a right government before, and it hasn't, to my memory at least, been this brutal.
Yeah.
Like the cuts are brutal. The change is brutal. The cancellation of projects and this sort of thing has been brutal in a way that I don't recall ever being the case. And it doesn't strike me as a party that has the country in its best interests.
Yeah, fair. Fair, bro. All right, let's get to a few of these super chats, and they've been coming in since the start of the show. Now, I'm assuming Candid Cat must be one of our Dunedin viewers, because I dropped off one hoodie today, rocking my new Buffer hoodie, tuning in live, been hooked since discovered your channel. Oh, thanks, man. Keep up the great work. P.S. I have a photo with myself and that French-Canadian guy, young and naive, forgive me. Oh, Seymour, French-Canadian guy. Gotcha. From Candid Cat for a $10 super chat. Thank you for that, and I'm glad you're enjoying the hoodie. Of course, everyone else that I had to post it to, you would have got notifications today for the tracking numbers. Frosty, will BHN cover Scrutiny Week? Well, we have covered it a little bit, and actually it comes up in the conversation we're about to have with Tamatha Paul as well. So Scrutiny Week will continue to come up because we're getting information from what was scrutinised. So it'll come up. I don't know if we'll specifically cover what happened in the week, but it will continue to come up. Peter Sim for $5, thank you for the super chat. Scrutiny Week reminds me of the big block of cheese day on the West Wing. I never watched the West Wing. Did you watch the West Wing?
I did watch chunks of it.
Yeah,
but yes, I don't remember that reference though.
All right, Jonathan, it's okay, guys. I live in Auckland, and there is life after a new Kmart opening. I'm with you though, Chewy. Like I said, after COVID, with everyone going to McDonald's, it's just like, dude, guys, this is not that important. You know, I'm sure I'll go to
Auckland losing their shit over IKEA or Costco.
Oh God, I remember when what's the mall in Mount Wellington called? I was working in radio when the mall in I can't think of the name of it. Mall in Mount Wellington. It's got its own off ramp from the motorway, and I was doing traffic, I think, for News Talk ZB and some of those stations. And the day it opened, like, motorway was backed up from Mount Wellington to sort of the bridge, the harbour bridge, and it was like the worst day of traffic ever.
I'm just imagining this, and now we're crossing to Pat down with the traffic report. Pat, how's it going down there? Shit's fucked. All right, back to you at the studio.
Lurchify, thank you for the $5 super chat. Private ownership was clearly great for the owners of Exxon Valdez, the Rena, or the Titanic. Very good. Kiwi Bird, this coalition wants to privatize everything because they know they are useless. It's an admission they suck. Peter says, and the South Island to the list, add South Island, to the list of things this government doesn't care about. Kookie says he's terrible. Thank you for the super chat, Kookie. And James has said a sunk cost for sinking the ferry deals is $800 million. I see what you did there. Blah, 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 blah. I guess that's blah, 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 blah. Thank you for the super chat.
$800 million for nothing.
Yeah, so now
that is a bad deal.
Yeah. So what was it going to be the total of it? Like 3.2 in the end. So that so they spent 800. That means they had another 2.4 to go. See if these guys can get a new, smaller, less capable couple of ferries for less than 2.4 billion. We'll see what happens, eh? Which means they'll end up spending the same money. What do we say? Spend the same money today for a Corolla that would have purchased you a brand new Ferrari 6 months ago. National 2026. All right. Got Tamatha Paul on this afternoon. I know that lots of you guys absolutely love Tamatha. We hear it in the chat all the time. So it was great to meet her for the first time and to have her on to have a chat about what was going on as a response, in particular, to the announcement from the government with their youth crime. Can you call them ideas? Whatever. So let's jump to this, and me and Chewy will be. Are you going to come back? Are you going to hang around for this?
Yeah. I'll definitely hang around.
All right. We'll get to Tamatha Paul, and we will be back with you momentarily after the conversation has happened. Welcome to the show, spokesperson for the Greens, Tamatha Paul. Tamatha, thank you so much for joining us today.
All good, no stress.
Hey, big announcement over the weekend. I'll just read out from an article this morning, just to give the synopsis of what I've jumped you on for. The opposition is fired up over the government's plan to crack down on youth offenders, calling them cruel, inexcusably shallow, and likely to increase reoffending. On Sunday, Children's Minister Karen Shaw announced the government is introducing a new young serious offenders sentencing category to ensure they face tougher consequences. Under the new category, young offenders could be sent to a military-style academy or face greater use of electronic and judicial monitoring. Police will also have the power to arrest a young person without a warrant for non-compliance with conditions of an order or a breach of their bail conditions. Now, I do have a bunch of specific questions about that, but I'd like to just throw it to you first of all and see what you think about the announcement over the weekend.
Yeah, so I know for a fact that this approach isn't going to work. And the reason I know that is because we've already tried in the past as a country to meet very traumatized young people, a small number. Like I think the government's doing a really great job at catastrophizing the issue and making it worse than it actually is.
Sure.
But we have tried changing people's behavior, young people's behavior with punishment in the past, and it never works. It never, ever works. And it's like, when will we get to the point when we realize that a justice approach to what is often a consequence of poverty, abject poverty, but also a poverty of opportunity, and trauma, these kids, we're not talking about kids that woke up one morning and decided to steal a car in a ram raid. We're talking about young people who have known nothing but cruelty and punishment their entire lives. Right. Neglect, abandonment, trauma, this is the kinds of things that these young people are dealing with. And it's just the same insane response from governments, both Labour and National, to think that locking kids up is going to change the outcome. And it's not going to change it. All it's going to do is make sure that these young people are in a lifetime cycle of incarceration, a lifetime of being locked up, a lifetime of being separated from anybody that actually cares about them. And it just won't work. And it's sad because we're literally talking about children.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know what you were up to when you were 12, but you know, we make mistakes.
Don't want to know.
Yes, we make mistakes, and I think locking someone up over that, a child up over that, is not going to get the response that people are after.
What I hear you saying is this is ambulance at the bottom of the cliff kind of legislation. It doesn't impact any of the drivers of crime. I guess there's always that argument about addressing the drivers of crime or the fence at the top of the cliff and just the decision or action taken by an individual, which is at the bottom of the cliff. Do you think there needs to be something where we both address both at the same time? Because obviously if there is an action, speaking in the justice realm, not necessarily about these kids that warrant some kind of punishment, that needs to happen today. But we need to also drive for a greater future of building that fence at the top of the cliff. You can't just go all to the fence at the moment because there's consequences, and you can't just go all bottom of the ambulance at the bottom because that doesn't address the drivers. How do we find that balance?
Well, I know, like, in terms of the consequences, I think that's probably a good place to start, because we know for a fact through listening to evidence given from psychiatrists and psychologists that work with children that actually your brain is not even fully developed at the age of 12 or 13 or 14 and all of your adolescence, which means you don't have the same capacity as an adult to fully take into account the consequences of your actions. And there's a whole range of different ways that the brain is not fully developed at that age. Taking into account consequences, being able to regulate your emotions and not be kind of hyped up into doing something, in the moment, the ability to resist peer pressure from your peers, all of these things that these children's brain has not learnt to do yet. And so, so coming at young people with all of these consequences when we know that their brain is not yet at a stage that they can fully take into account what those look like, it's a violation of the rights of children, but it's just a morally bankrupt way to approach an issue. So yeah, and I've talked to some of these young people. I've talked to young people that have committed ram raids. I've talked to young people who have created harm in their communities, and often they're able to turn their lives around, but it's never been as a result of being punished. Gotcha. It's never been as a result of being in a youth detention centre. It's never been as a result of being arrested. It has almost always been as a result of just one person in their life caring about them and helping them to do things that they never thought were possible for them. And these are quite basic things here, like getting their driver's license or getting or being able to get into training or education or going back to school, being able to go to school, living in a home environment where they're not afraid all the time. These are the basic things that young people are screaming out for. But instead the government chooses to ignore the calls and the evidence, and so that they can look like they're being tough on crime.
Yeah, for sure. How do we legislate to get a caring person into a young person's life? I agree with you. That can be the turning factor. But how does any government, forget who's in now, how does any government sit above the justice portfolio and go, okay, let's figure out youth crime in particular. Let's figure out getting a caring person into that kid's life. How does that happen?
Yeah, so legislation might not always be the answer. And I think in this case, it's actually a matter of resourcing the organisations that do that kind of one-on-one responding work. So your youth workers, your social workers, all of the people that build up the trust with that young people. It takes some time to build up that trust. And then they kind of are like a mentor to those young people, which they've never had before. They've never had that care. They've never had that love, and they've never had someone genuinely want better for them. And so that makes a huge difference. And these organizations are operating, on the smell of an oily rag. Like they've got nothing, they've got no funding. It's just often people that live in that community that refuse to accept that the only pathway for their young people is into prison. And I feel strongly about it because I grew up in Tokoroa in the South Waikato, and we were the same. Like we have such a high rate of alcohol stores, pokey machines, vape stores, like everything bad, fast food outlets. You know, that's the only investment we ever saw growing up there. And it's no surprise why some young people look around them and they're like, well, this is the life I'm either going to live a life of addiction or a life of harm, or I can just add to that harm. And that's the only options that there are. What I'm saying is we need to give these young people more opportunities and more choices so that they can turn their life around. And then the care to show them that they're worth turning their lives around. Because there is something better out there for them, you know?
So rather than this government promising 500 police officers, specifically thinking about youth, maybe 500 more social workers to interact directly with kids in schools or something might have been a better solution for this long term.
For sure. I mean, if you look at the budget, you'll see that the areas that the government has invested in is expanding Waikeria prison by like $1 billion, getting 800 more prison beds. They're investing in 500 more cops in our communities. You know, all of these elements they'll invest in, but every other intervention, whether it's health related, housing related, income related, job seeker related, all of those areas have all been cut. So what they're essentially saying is if you just happen to be born in the wrong community, the only pathway that we're willing to help you down is one that leads you into prison for the rest of your life, because that's the only area they're willing to invest in. And sure, it might make some of their more conservative voters happy that people are being punished, but at the end of the day, it doesn't get the outcomes that we all want, which is to be and to feel safe in our communities.
What does the research say when it comes to labelling young people serious offenders, like labelling a 14-year-old a serious offender? What does the research tell us about that?
One thing that was pretty disgusting about the announcement yesterday is that the minister and the prime minister started referring to these young people as YSOs. And it's almost like administratively they're making it easier to, again, lock people up much younger. And that is the entire response that this government has when it comes to harm and a lack of safety in the communities, and that's their entire approach. The evidence shows on the military youth boot camps in particular, the minister was advised strongly that a military component to working with these young people is not needed, and that it can cause further harm. Because you think about like the institutionalization that some of these young people have experienced their entire lives, whether that's being uplifted from their families for whatever reason, being in state care. We know state care has got a terrible reputation for looking after children. Most of the people in gangs have experienced abuse at the hands of the state. And then, you know, you've just created this life cycle for these young people of just institutionalization. They're constantly being conditioned to be a particular way, but it's conditioning them towards a lifetime of incarceration. It's limiting their beliefs of what they're capable of and what their potential is, because they're being told very clearly that, you know, this is the pathway that you are expected to go down. Which is dark, because again, it's dealing with children, and that's the main point I want to emphasize is, you know, you wouldn't treat your own child that way. So why are we comfortable with the state treating children who have already been let down by everybody around them be treated that way too?
Yeah. We seem to be living in the upside down, where not only will this government sort of reject research and expert advice, but they seem to rally in it. There seems to be a catch cries of them. My ministers won't even read those. They won't even read them at all. So there's no point in doing them. How do we actually, just on that. So when you guys are sitting around talking about these problems, why are they doing this? In your opinion, why is the government pushing through on these failed experiments like boot camps before. What do you guys, like Occam's razor talks about what's the most likely scenario here? Why are they trying to push back in failed experiments again?
Yeah, I reckon it comes down to two things, and it's that there's a real difference in the outcomes that these policies and legislation is seeking to achieve. So I think, so for me and for the Greens, the outcome that we would want to seek is one where those young people are given the support to turn their lives around, and that they're able to be given meaningful opportunities so that they can live a life where they're not creating harm. Like, that's the outcome that we want. The outcome that the government wants is to be seen to be doing something about this issue. And it's no doubt, like, I have no doubt through being involved in some of these conversations that their objective is to please their voters who think that locking kids up and locking people up is a good response to making our community safer. But it definitely isn't. And when people realize that most people that go to prison will come back out into the community at some point, that's when I think we need to realize that if they're going to come back out into the community, then maybe we should make sure that the time spent that we're actually helping them to reflect on their behavior and change it before people come back into the community. Whereas, I think there's this mindset that exists with some voters, and definitely with both National and Labour, that continuing to lock people up somehow leads to a good outcome, but it never does. The carceral logic of locking people up and expecting them to come out as better people is flawed. It's never worked. It doesn't work anywhere in the country. And it feels like we're in a race with America to have the most highly incarcerated population per capita.
I would add to what you're saying. You say locking people up. I would add locking some people up. Because, for example, they won't give IRD new powers to go looking after white-collar crime, for example, and the person who may have embezzled hundreds or millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not looking to lock those people up. The person who's stolen $100 from something, they're looking to lock those up as a new, young, serious offender, which makes me think as well, do you know, I don't, do you know like the crime rates difference between adults and youth? Because they're spending a lot of time focusing on the youth. Is that like, and I'm being silly here, 90% of the crime in New Zealand? Because if it is, you go, oh, okay, well, that's the biggest slice of the pie, more focus. But I suspect that the youth crime overall will be lesser than the adult crime. So then again, that question is, why is there this disproportionate look at it, if indeed that is correct? Do you know?
That was something that I raised with the ministers over the last week. So we had Scrutiny Week at Parliament, where basically ministers just come and tell us about their budgets, and we get to ask them questions. And I asked the same thing, why are we putting $5 million into these boot camps when there's only 10 young people that will go through this pilot? Like, it seems like a disproportionate amount of money to punish a very small group of people, and when the evidence shows that this approach doesn't work at all. So I mean, it makes no sense at all. With youth crime, there was undeniably a spike in ram raids and a spike in youth crime during the COVID period, because this is what happens when you take young people away from their schools, their communities, their everything, which had to be done, but it shows that when you remove young people from the support systems that they have in place, there is a backlash. There is a backlash in that there's an increase in that stuff happening. And so, but other than that, those ram raids and that youth crime has been decreasing over time. It's almost like there's this, it's like fanaticism over youth crime. It's being made out to be a much bigger issue than it really is, when it actually is quite manageable, and it is a very small number of young people who actually fit into the would even fit into the young serious offender category. I mean, you have to have been charged twice for an offence of up to 10 years, and there's a number of other steps. So the actual group of people who are impacted by this policy is very small. but somehow it's become one of the biggest government responses to law and order and wanting communities to feel safer. But it won't work because, I mean, it's a failed experiment, and so it won't get the outcomes that the government is after.
And keeps talking about very loudly the outcomes. Hey, it's been amazing talking to you today, Tamatha. If you've got a couple of more minutes, I know it's not your portfolio, it's more Julie and Genta, but many of us have been kind of smirking over the weekend with the necessity for this government now to buy new ferries, of course, after they cancel the new ferries. You got any thoughts around that?
Oh, it's just like, it's so frustrating because it's like, we do have a government that is allergic to evidence and is just allergic to, like they're allergic to the consequences of their actions. And we knew, like with the ferries and the terminal redevelopment and all of that mahi here, we knew that was going to be the outcome, that there would be a failure of one of the ferries. And we knew that, we knew we needed that investment. And now they're going to have to fork up even more money. Because, and it's the same as all of the public sector job cuts as well. It's like you've cut all of these jobs to look good and by your own metrics, but then you're just going to have to pay consultants more to do the work. So it's like in the long run, the financial recklessness of this government means that we all pay for it even more so in the end. So the people that like to think of themselves as fiscally responsible actually just end up costing us all a lot more in the long run by neglecting the urgent work that needs to be done now.
It's almost like there's not a truth in that they are the party of responsibility and the party of good budgets. It's almost like that's falling apart around them like it does every time. Hey, again, thanks so much for joining us today. How are the Greens doing a week on from Martimer's announcement? How are you guys getting through?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge year for us. For us, it's like we just need to all step up in our respective areas, even more than we have, and just go hard so that Marama has the space and the space to fully recover and heal, and then come back and we can all go hard again. But yeah, it's been rough, and it does feel like it's been pretty unfair, the amount of things that have happened to us this year. But we keep going. And
we'll pass on our love. We sent her a message last week, not expecting to hear back from her because we're all thinking of her and hoping the best. So, but thank you for joining us today. Love to have you on finally. Love to have you back again. It's been a blast and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Pat. Happy to come back on anytime.
And there you go. Chewy, Sir, your thoughts. You can I obviously got a chance to speak to Tamatha, so you're welcome to pick up on anything you like. Your mic's not on. You can pick up on anything you like once you turn your mic
on. Very much on the same mind when it comes to the boot camps. Every time we look at how we're punishing these young people, we magically think that coming down on them is going to shunt them onto the right path. I can't see it bringing anything more than resentment. People have fond memories of boot camps from the good old days of compulsory military service, but it's a very different thing. Those sort of boot camps, everyone was there, not just the bad ones. And if you're forced to do something, you don't necessarily engage with the process. It's different when it's something like the Limited Services Volunteers group where people chose to be there. They might not have been given much of a choice, but they were still choosing to be there.
Yeah. James is right, eh? Allergic to evidence.
100% agree with that.
Obviously made me laugh.
Yeah, absolutely allergic to evidence. And that's all they've got. They know they can't point to statistics and studies that show that these things work. So instead we get stuff like this. I don't care. Fired Up Luxon defends boot camps for youth offenders. I don't care if nothing backs me up that these work.
Yeah, one of the points that Tamatha made
is no.
Yeah, what Tamatha made, which I hadn't thought about, is when we hear from the police as to, you're talking about youth and the most serious offenders. How many are they? They go, that's about 30 people in New Zealand. I was like, oh yeah. So how many people, if it's about a second offence that could get up to 10 years imprisonment for a young person, is this actually going to be? Is it going to be one person in a barrack completely by themselves because they're the first and it's got to wait another 6 months for the second? That's a really interesting point. I wonder how many people they're expecting. I don't know if they've been asked that question.
Yeah, and just like anything to do with justice, is it's an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
Why? And if we can't, as we've been discussing all night, we can't take this government on faith that they are good financial managers. We can't take this government on faith that they have what is best for this country in mind.
We can actually use the evidence before us that they're not. Like, with no faith needed, evidence in front of us that they're not those things.
The only problem that these guys are trying to solve is making sure their backers have a nice fat back pocket and making sure that they solve some of the problems that they said that they'd solve to get into government, while leaving enough problems that can be blamed on Labour to enable them to get into their second term.
Yeah.
It's not about these kids. It's not really about the community anything more than they know that the community is pissed off.
Yeah.
And that people will always vote for punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair. All right, a couple of super chats that have come in. Gold says, if I do nothing for the government, can I have 800 million too? I'd fund BHN for a decade. That's 80 million a year. I don't know if that's enough to fund us, is it? 80 million, 10, 800
Oh,
million?
there'd be some changes.
Yeah.
Might get 2 or 3 shitty webcams.
Yeah. Tafari says, Nicola Willis told Tony Alexander of a property investor forum that National would reverse the rules for them. Tony wrote about how, quote, recession is good. And Kiwi Bird, thank you for your super chat as well, says, any chance we can get Julianne Genter on the show? We will. We've had Julianne Genter before, and I've had her on other podcasts, and, I'm sure there will be times where it's appropriate to have her on. We'll get them on. We don't want to, I've got a few relationships. They're not, not bosom buds or anything, but you only want to call on them for the times you really need them, see if they can come on. But the Greens were great today. I gave them a phone call and spoke to the press secretaries, and they chased it around and got Tamatha for us. So that is it. All right, team. Is there anything else? I've got to do a pre-record interview in 25 minutes, so I might time for me to tootle along. But we've got anything else before we wrap up? Anything else to get to? Any other chats that are going on or anything you want to mention?
Nothing that I have particularly starred or anything like that. So I think we will gift you the time rather than just pushing right through up until the minute.
I actually made a couple of thumbnails while that thing was going. So I've tried to cover off some of my after show work already. So there you go. All right, guys. Thanks for being with it. Yes, as I've just said, I am in 25 minutes. I'm speaking to the Deputy Welsh Language Commissioner, O'Shan Llewellyn, about what other countries who have a minority native language, how other countries treat that language. Obviously, it's Welsh in Wales, and he works for the government department. It's a language commission, and he's the deputy there. And I just want to go, what happens over there with your road signs? Is there a political party that pushes back against, Welsh being on road signs? Oh, do you know anything about Ireland or Scotland? Are they the same? Do they have the same sort of vibe as you? Just because we're doing research as to how governments around the world treat a minority native language and see if it lines up with what we're being told here. That's what we're doing. All right, guys. And if you guys from Wales are watching, we'll see you in 15 minutes. And other than that, Joey, I'll see you tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. All the orders from last week have now gone through to the printer. He will order all the hoodies and shirts and stuff tomorrow. He normally gets them 24 to 48 hours later. That means he should be printing them at the latest on Wednesday. And that means I should have them by Friday to get them all sort of up and ready for you. And speaking of, if you have signed up in the last week, then we have made a new trailer for you. When we say we, of course, I mean I. and you will see your names scrolling by. Oh gosh, I wish the wrong one, Joey. That's what I meant. Oh, not even that one.
Minimized.
That one there. Momentarily.
And sure, they got the news. Big Henry style, keeping it loose. New Zealand, where the politics play. They bring the truth every single day. Talking about the mess all over the land. They shine a light with a mic in their hand. No time for cheese, just act straight up. Plan and chew, never backing up. From the Cape to Bluff, no place too far. They expose the truth and raise the bar. Politicians tremble at their mighty voice. Pat and chew, they'll make the right choice.
All right, team, thank you for being with us tonight. Huge thanks to Tamatha Paul for joining us tonight. Thanks to the Greens for sorting all that out for us. Be safe for the next 24 hours. Come back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Bring a friend. If you enjoy what we do, if you want to support what we do, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And you too could be on our credits playing up over our shoulders right now. That's it for me. Anything else from you, Chewy?
No, just be good. Be good to each other. See you tomorrow. Okay.
All right, team. Hooroo.
Cheers, man.